The audience is advised that the following program involves themes which could be disturbing for some viewers.
Tonight on Spotlight.
You were 15 when you had the operation?
Yes. I underwent the double mastectomy and I had my breast surgically removed.
It's the most controversial story this year.
Children are being told they should change from boy to girl or girl to boy from as young as 12 years old.
You go ahead, take that testosterone, it'll fix everything. I'm a female to male to female detransitioner.
Is a generation being brainwashed?
It's so trendy, it's very in right now.
I was just looking for a sense of belonging.
The desperate warning every parent needs to hear.
The mother and as a child psychiatrist, I could not hold my head up if I didn't speak about this.
We are in the midst of a medical scandal.
I said, no, this is my daughter in here. No, it's your son.
Children as young as 5 to 10 years of age declaring this is who I am and this is who I want to be for the rest of my life.
Unlike you, I just don't like to see the damage done.
What about the damage done to the kids who receive no care?
You're happy to see a 15-year-old girl go and have a double mastectomy, eh?
I was totally lied to.
Hello, I'm Michael Usher and welcome to Spotlight. Tonight, Liam Bartlett investigates the dramatic rise in child and adolescent gender transitions in Australia, turning boys into girls and girls into boys. For some, it is the answer to who they really are, but for others, it's causing irreparable physical and emotional damage.
Gender dysphoria, the distress a child experiences because of a mismatch between their gender identity and their sex assigned at birth.
Happy Pride Month. Here are the top 5 reasons to be trans. Number 5, the goddess of transformation will whisper to you all of her secrets. Number 4, happiness. Kind of boring, but it's true.
Tell me I'm breathing.
In Perth, I'm on my way to meet Courtney. She's an upholsterer whose life journey reads like a cautionary tale. Right now, she's detransitioning, that is, returning to the sex she was born as. Courtney wants to undo the decision she made in her teens to become a man. For 5 years, thanks to testosterone and a range of other drugs, Courtney identified as Connor.
Do you understand how you got into the headspace where you thought, I would rather be a man instead?
Yeah, so back then I was getting a lot of male attention and I didn't like that. And I thought, well, if I was a man, life would be so much easier.
So that was as you were hitting puberty, and then all that became very confusing.
And it was very confusing because my mother was forcing me to be ultra feminine and there was no praise or emphasis on physical strength anymore. It was all about just being pretty.
Okay, so from a tomboy, you wanted to then almost be a boy.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 younger brothers and I was always envious of them and the way my mother let them do whatever they wanted. So that just got in my head that, oh, this is a thing you can do, it's really easy, you can just change gender, it's no worries. I was totally lied to, even by doctors. I was sold this thing that isn't possible.
You use a lot of online stuff, right? YouTube and all sorts of things. How much of an influence do you think, though, online material, the online community is, for kids who may be suffering gender dysphoria?
Oh, absolutely. I think social media is the ideal modern day psyops platform more than anything. I mean, if you want to push any agenda, that's the way to do it.
Number 3, it's so cool. It's so trendy. It's very in right now.
The only way to really know if you are trans and you want to transition is to experiment.
The girls are girling. Nothing huge, but there are titties where there wasn't titties before.
My name is Chloe Cole, and I was allowed to transition at 12 years old. I believe that children deserve better than having their momentary feelings dictate how the rest of their life plays out.
At 12, Chloe changed her name to Leo. 1 year later, she began changing her body.
I was 13 when I began taking puberty blockers and testosterone, and I was 15 when I underwent the double mastectomy and I had my breasts surgically removed.
You were 15 when you had the operation?
Yes.
One thing Chloe's case proves beyond doubt is that location has nothing to do with the way kids can be influenced. She grew up here in rural California, best known around these parts for being the pumpkin capital of the world. But it may as well be country Victoria or outback Queensland. The point is, for developing children in online communities, where they physically are makes no difference to how they may feel about their physical self.
Before you had the operation, did you think of yourself as a girl or a boy?
I didn't really have any doubts about being a girl up until I was maybe about 11 or 12, when I would look at myself and I felt so ugly. Like I wasn't shaped like how I thought women were supposed to look like. I wasn't particularly curvy. I had smaller, less developed breasts and hips, and I liked having my hair short. I didn't dress femininely, and I thought that I would never make a good woman. That, in a lot of ways, I would be better off as a boy, and I even questioned at times why I was born the way that I was. But it wasn't until I was introduced to the transgender community online that I actually started to think of myself as a boy.
So you were having enormous self-image problems?
Right.
Did your mum or your dad say, please don't do this?
Yeah, I mean, I would talk with them about starting on testosterone, and I remember my mom telling me, like, it's not gonna make you happy, you know? Like, it's not gonna fix every issue you have, and you should probably wait until you're an adult to do stuff like that, which was beyond a reasonable response, really. But I just thought that they didn't understand. I was taught that this was the only option that I had to be myself. One of the mantras of the transgender community is that trans men are men and trans women are women. And in my heart, I really believed that I was a boy.
So you thought, get it done now, get it done early.
Right. I mean, the idea is kind of that the younger you transition, the better, because the less like secondary sex characteristics pop up during puberty, and so the less gender dysphoria you'll experience. From the transgender community, I would hear about how these treatments are all safe for children and adolescents, and that the risks were far outweighed by the benefits of them. Though that line of thinking doesn't really take into account just how dangerous it is to transition as a kid.
So you don't like the idea of puberty blockers at all?
No. I mean, Sweden, I think, has outlawed them. It absolutely permanently destroys people. Their bones, their sex drive. You can't just play with nature in that way. Puberty is a human right, and no one has the right to intervene with that, even if the patient wants it.
I've come to Victoria, which has the most radical laws in the country when it comes to gender identity. It also has the busiest gender clinic for children and adolescents, with over 1,000 patients being seen at Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital. And that has got many people worried.
We need to review gender-affirming policies as a matter of urgency.
Alarmed by Victoria's punitive new laws regarding children and gender, David Limbrick, a Victorian MP from the Libertarian Party, recently sent out a tweet.
If your child asks you for a tattoo and you say no, you're a good parent. But if they ask you for puberty blockers and you say no, you're breaking the law.
The emails came flooding in from parents like the ones you're about to hear. They're too scared to appear on camera, but they've agreed to let us use their words and their voices.
It may be paranoid of me, but having heard of parents being referred to child protection for not affirming gender identities, I'm very, very concerned that this not happen to us.
We observed that many of our daughter's cohort and friends at her school had begun coming out as transgender or non-binary. In fact, there were 4 within a class of 20.
Many of these parents feel abandoned.
One psychologist who advertised as being a specialist in female autism told me she would affirm my daughter because she was a suicide risk.
They're in vulnerable situations and a lot of them feel very alone. They feel scared to speak out because they'll be attacked.
She started identifying as trans at 16 and taking testosterone at 18. I found out 6 months later, when it became obvious that her voice had broken. We're also deeply concerned about the health and also irreversible masculizing side effects.
Think your voice will get lighter?
I mean, I could pitch it higher if I wanted to. Hang on, I'm going to try and... it gets into the Barbie voice. It gets really high up in there. Yeah, I got to practice that. But it's a little higher than it was when I was on testosterone.
My name is Hayden. I am 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. It's 1 year on testosterone.
Is this issue a little bit poisonous for a politician?
It's very poisonous. I was scared to talk about it because lots of people get attacked when they talk about this issue. But I just feel so strongly about it. I'm such a strong believer in parental rights. It's like there's a war between government and parents on control of kids.
But David, it's illegal here in Victoria for the school not to agree with the child. What sort of craziness is that?
You know, we had concerns about this when it was first brought in Victoria back in 2021. The very fact that no one is really allowed to say, oh, hold up a minute, the teachers can't, the psychologists can't, the doctors can't, they all just have to basically affirm whatever the child says. It's concerning because we know for a fact that sometimes people make mistakes in these decisions, or sometimes there's other underlying causes that need to be explored and looked at.
Well, it's a bit of a surprise, isn't it? You get a letter from the school saying you enrolled a son, but you've now got a daughter.
It would be absolutely shocking, yeah, absolutely shocking.
So I'm medically transitioning without telling my parents, and so far they don't suspect a thing.
We need to make sure that parental rights are paramount. No children should be socially transitioning in schools without the parents' knowledge and consent.
And I don't think I'll have too much trouble hiding it. It's like boiling a frog. If you go slow enough, they won't even notice.
As a mother or father, what would you do if your child told you they were now the opposite sex? In Newcastle, in New South Wales, I'm here to meet Jude and John, who've had exactly that happen to them. They're parents of a son and daughter who they've asked us not to identify.
Oh, look. How cute.
In her teens, their daughter struggled with her mental health.
So the mental health issues that she had, are we talking anxiety, depression, that sort of thing?
Yes.
But there was nothing in that related to any of her sexuality?
Not to our knowledge.
Look, I think prior there may have been, the typical teenage experimentation, if you like, of, announcing that she was bisexual. Then it was, that she was gay, all fine with all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden she just decided to go to the next step, I guess, encouraged by other people who were telling her that she was transgender.
Did she think changing her sexuality would solve all those problems?
That's possibly the case, that looking for an answer, looking for an out, looking for a solution to pain. I think so many of these kids are led to believe that changing the exterior will fix something.
What Jude and John did not know was their 17-year-old girl began identifying as a boy at school, using different pronouns and a male name. Indeed, they were completely in the dark until they saw a post on Facebook.
All of a sudden, your daughter says on social media, "I'm now a boy." And so what sort of conversation did you have with her then?
I just said, "This is crazy." I said, you're not a boy. That you're simply not a boy. People can't change sex.
And her reaction?
I was immediately called everything under the sun, hateful, bigoted, transphobic, all these expressions that I'd actually never, ever heard before. Bigoted. I was a bigot. But then I was told that she'd been going by that other name at school for months, and apparently everyone at school, including the teachers, were supportive, and we were hateful, horrible parents because we didn't immediately jump on board with this new identity.
Well, had the school told you?
No, I had no notifications from the school that she had changed her name at school.
Was she getting a lot of advice on social media?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
I found a history on her computer, and the web browser history of transgender sites and searches just blew my mind.
Okay, so if you're questioning your gender
First
identity
binder is actually a
and
DIY
wondering if you
binder
might be
that I
trans,
made for myself when I was 15. If you can't buy a binder,
Hi, I'm Livo. I had top surgery 9 months ago. I used to dread getting ready. Dysphoria would always lead to a meltdown.
The stuff I saw, the things I listened to, young girls boasting about taking hormones, having double mastectomies, how their lives were so improved by all these interventions, and that, jump on board, you must do this is the solution.
Your number one reason to be trans, it's hot. Being trans is so hot. And as someone who is T for T, I would like for there to be more hot trans people in the world. Thank you.
Not long after Jude and John's daughter declared she was male, she was diagnosed by a psychiatrist as suicidal and admitted to hospital.
John stayed with her overnight for the admission. I came in the next morning to visit her. I said, "I'm here to see my daughter." I was corrected and told I had a son in there. And when I got to her bed, there was the male name above her bed.
But hang on, you admitted her as your daughter?
Yes.
So what right did the hospital have to change her sex?
They were awful to us. They put us down in front of her. They told us in front of her that we were bigoted, unsupportive parents, that we needed to teach our family inclusion. And they said they immediately wanted to refer her to a paediatric endocrinologist to start on testosterone.
And she was only 17 at the time.
17?
17.
Do you know what the doctors were saying to her without you there?
They were telling her that she needed to get onto testosterone and, have her breasts cut off.
Who was telling you this? The nurses, the doctors?
Yep. All the staff were telling us that this was now our son and we had to accept this, and would you rather have a live son or a dead daughter? That's what they said to us.
Coming up.
maybe all my unhappiness is because I was born in the wrong, sex.
Those answers now, in
What a
hindsight.
mistake. It was killing me. I was so incredibly ill.
It took a little bit for the regret to set in.
And then by that time, it's too late.
Far too late.
I am the thunder.
Mel Jeffries is a brave woman. She's admitting to one of the biggest mistakes she's ever made, trying to become a man. She's now detransitioning back to the sex she was born as. But she'll forever carry the physical and emotional scars of her decision.
There ain't no stopping me now.
If you're meeting someone and you're telling them about your journey, how do you describe it?
A cluster. It feels like that's the most appropriate term, but it's like a lot.
It's
We'll
not.
just say it's a lot.
You're being a bit hard on yourself.
I've gone through a lot.
Born a girl, Mel grew into an unhappy teenager. She suffered from depression and confusion about her sexuality and began to believe her life would be better if she transitioned.
How did that begin?
Probably like through puberty, I had like quite a few experiences that were negative. Like I was sexually assaulted, and I feel like that was quite a big fuel for me wanting to transition and not be a woman anymore.
Because you felt what being a woman was making you vulnerable?
More vulnerable and like an easy target. I thought that I was safer within like a male identity.
So you thought changing genders would solve that, would provide a degree of protection?
That's not like, that's part of like the magical thinking that I had at that time, where it was like, I could be someone completely different and I wouldn't have to be me. Like I wouldn't have to deal with everything that came along in my life. I spoke to like a trans activist who was like, I felt the exact way you felt, like how you feel in your body and like what you deal with. And it kind of like really kind of solidified like, oh, transitioning could be like the solution. Maybe all my unhappiness is because I was born in the wrong, sex.
And those answers now, in hindsight, were a mistake.
Yeah, they left me worse off.
Hey guys, it's been 2 years since I changed to Edie. Told you have to be a little bit naughty.
Were you finding those answers online?
Yeah, it was that, like, the online is how I, like, got in contact with that, like, activism.
If other people were watching this and they were at the beginning of their journey, what advice would you have for them?
Try and tell people instead of just waiting till you're older.
Yeah, I kind of, like, planted the seed of, like, oh, there's people that like this that exist. I was like 16, 17. I was just looking for a sense of belonging. And then it's like, if you do transition, it's like, oh, everyone, like, gives you so much love and attention and stuff. It's like, you know, it was just, I don't know.
Almost the love of a new family.
Well, actually, they said, like, it's like joked about it in, like when I was in the LGBT community. It was like, there's your biological family, they're the family you don't choose, and then there's your logical family. They're the ones, we choose you.
When she was 18, Mel began living as a man. She called herself Mason. However, to truly begin the transition, she needed a doctor to prescribe her testosterone, but that proved no problem.
I just got diagnosed and I was on my way.
So how many hours, minutes, days did it take before you, from the time you went to the doctor?
What do you mean with the how long did it take to get diagnosed? Like under an hour.
Under an hour?
Yeah. Because I was primed with, like, if you don't transition, you're gonna, like, die. You're gonna kill yourself. You're just priming people to do this. You're priming people to hurt themselves.
The testosterone did its job. A deeper voice, facial hair, more muscle, and weight. But her next step was a radical and irreversible one.
All my hatred of being a woman was just focused on my chest, like on my breasts.
At 26, Mel had a double mastectomy. But instead of the happiness she sought, she was left with a pervading sense of loss.
After the operation, Mel, was there a light bulb moment? What made you want to be a woman again?
I don't know if it's light bulb, but it's like I heard I was called Mason, and that literally just, like, it just felt so foreign and alien. And then it's just like, why is it hearing that name just feels so disorienting for me?
Courtney Colson was 28 and identifying as Connor when she too was scheduled to have her breasts surgically removed. But the pandemic saw the operation put on hold.
So COVID saved you?
COVID saved me in a weird way, yeah.
Nonetheless, for 5 years, Courtney lived as a man. Regular injections of testosterone lowered her voice and changed the structure of her jaw. Other medications suppressed her periods. But ultimately, none of these interventions gave her what she was looking for. And in October 2020, Connor became Courtney again.
5 years later, you just said one day, literally, that's it.
It was killing me. I was so incredibly ill. And I realized, oh, maybe it is the testosterone. And constant priapism. Right. An erection of the female tissue constantly. And I just, okay, this is bad. This is really bad. I gotta stop.
Was any of that decision tied up with you somewhere in the back of your brain thinking, I want to be a woman again?
No, I just realized, oh, I live in the real world and I cannot be the man I want to be. So suck it up.
For Chloe, her life as Leo seemed set in stone following a double mastectomy at 15. At first, the teenager, who began taking puberty blockers at 13, was fine with this new body.
Before I went home, and for about a week, I wasn't able to take off the medical binder or the bandages or anything like that, because I just for the integrity of the stitches and the grafts. But once I did, it was a little horrific. I didn't quite regret it yet. It took a little bit for the regret to set in.
And then by that time, it's too late, Chloe.
Far too late.
That's the sad thing about it, isn't it? And that's hard to get my head around it. It's your body. I don't know how you managed to cope with that.
It's something that I still struggle with today.
I am standing on the front line with no man's land between me and my
The whole thing was a lie. The very premise of it was a lie. The further I went into it, the more my body masculinized, and especially once my breasts were gone. With each step, it made me more conscious of the fact that no matter what parts of my body I was rid of, no matter what was taken from me, I would always be a woman.
Are you with me?
So you're here telling me that despite the testosterone and the double mastectomy, you're no better off?
Are you with me?
No, I'm worse off.
I am begging you to come back on my side. We are hanging by a thread and you keep reaching for your knife to cut it.
As I said at the beginning, Mel Jeffries is a brave woman. She wanted to show you. She wanted to be heard. She believed becoming a man would heal her. But it didn't.
I'm never gonna be over it. It's not even they're wounds, they're not even scars, so it's I'm still bleeding. I'm still processing it and grieving. I've literally been violated by the medical industry.
Are you with me? Are you with me?
Next.
How do you take a self-diagnosis from a 6-year-old?
You can't.
I've seen kids see a social worker for 2 sessions and then start puberty blockers.
You call it a medical scandal. Do you really think it's that bad?
Yes. Sterilising children and leaving them sexually dysfunctional for the rest of their lives on the basis of their declared identity is a medical scandal.
What parents really need to know is that it's a very dangerous time for children and families, and they need to be very cautious about who they let engage with their child.
The exact number of young Australian children currently embarking on a transgender journey is hard to pin down. But if this fairly nondescript looking building is anything to go by, they are pretty concerning. This is the Maple Leaf Gender Clinic, one of 7 state-run facilities right around the country. And here alone in regional Newcastle, no less than 95 kids are right now on a diet of puberty blockers. The doctors here at the Maple Leaf say these kids are just part of the transgender forest, where every tree is different.
Across Australia, there are 7 facilities that treat and medically assist adolescent children to change their sex. The Perth Children's Hospital is one of them. They didn't return our calls. The Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne also said no. And so did Westmead in Sydney. And so it went.
This is another gender clinic, this one in Brisbane, based inside the Queensland Children's Hospital. Here at the moment, they have more than 900 patients on their books. But one thing they all seem to have in common is secrecy. Despite our continued requests to the medical bosses who run these taxpayer-funded clinics to answer questions about how they make their life-altering decisions, all we hear is silence.
It's not just their refusal to speak that's worrying. It's the refusal to listen to those who speak out.
Do you think the hospital want to sack you?
Yes. Yes, they do.
They want you off the books?
They don't want me hanging around in the hospital.
Because as far as they're concerned, you're a troublemaker.
Well, I cause trouble in that everyone now knows how I feel about the affirmation model, and it is the case that actually the vast majority of child psychiatrists have similar concerns, and I know a lot of the staff do too.
A few things to know here. The affirmation model essentially means accepting someone's gender identity without question, even if they're a child. It's a controversial view. But when Dr. Gillian Spencer dared to question it, executives at the Queensland Children's Hospital suspended her. 20 years' experience as a child psychiatrist seemed to count for nothing. But this mother of 3 is standing her ground. She believes children are being too quickly assessed as trans without a fuller examination of other possible issues.
Hypothetically, if I took my child to the gender clinic here in Brisbane, for example, how many times would I have to go before I could start that child on some sort of hormone treatment?
Well, I've seen kids see a social worker for 2 sessions and then be referred to the paediatric sexual health physician to start puberty blockers.
2 sessions?
2 sessions.
How many minutes would that be?
120?
So a couple of hours of having a chat.
Yes.
And you start something that could affect your life potentially forever.
From the gender clinic's point of view, they see it as like an emergency if a child's going into puberty, and so they see it as an urgent measure to start the puberty blockers.
But there's no coming back from that, is there?
Well, what we know from their widespread use is that they prevent the gender dysphoria from healing, and so more than 95% of kids who get onto puberty blockers will go on to cross-sex hormones, and then the pathway beyond that is lifelong and includes dangerous surgery.
Right, so from the stats, we know that pretty much once you start taking them, you're on that bus.
You're on that bus.
Who are we now?
So everyone keeps asking why I'm detransitioning.
I don't understand how a child can go there for their first appointment and they can be children as young as 5 to 10 years of age declaring this is who I am and this is who I want to be for the rest of my life, and the doctors at the children's hospital saying, okay, that's good enough for us.
That's what amazes me. I mean,
Yeah,
as
it is.
as a paediatric expert, tell me how that works. How do you take a self-diagnosis from a 6-year-old?
You can't. And it makes no sense when we are told by the transgender community that gender can be fluid. So someone can be gender fluid, but we're supposed to accept that these children's gender identity is fixed at the age of 10, and this is how their gender identity will be for the rest of their lives. How can something be both fluid and fixed in a 10-year-old? It makes no sense to me.
Dr. Dylan Wilson is a paediatrician practicing in Queensland and one of the few doctors in Australia prepared to speak publicly. Recently, Dr. Wilson wrote an open letter to his peers, questioning their unquestioning referrals of confused adolescents to gender clinics.
In your open letter, you call it a medical scandal.
Yes.
Do you really think it's that bad?
Yes, absolutely. In Australia, hundreds, if not 1,000, over 1,000 children who have been commenced on this pathway, whose puberty has been stopped, and they've progressed onto treatments with cross-sex hormones and surgery, and those children's bodies have been irrevocably changed and harmed for the rest of their lives. There's no other word for it in my view. It's a medical scandal.
We need to take a different approach towards children with gender dysphoria. We need to be able to say to them, we understand that you're in distress and that you're feeling really uncomfortable in your body, and we want to do everything we can to support you through it. But we know that the risks and long-term consequences of transition are so serious that we can't just assume that that's the right way forward. Because of this, we're going to continue to use your biological name and pronouns, but we're going to work with you to understand exactly what you're going through and do everything we can to try and help you.
Well, that sounds like an open medical approach.
Yeah, well, it's a safe medical approach. And there's no evidence that social transition or puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones reduce the suicide risk in children with gender dysphoria.
Okay, so just because you're giving it to them doesn't mean that they're going to think any differently about themselves.
No, and any health professional that tells a parent that they're more likely to lose their child to suicide if they don't affirm them is wrong.
You're very definite about that.
I am.
You've been labelled transphobic. How do you relate to that?
I see this as a really serious child protection issue, and as a 45-year-old woman and as a mother and as a child psychiatrist, I could not hold my head up if I didn't speak about this. It's too important. And what we're talking about is the well-being of children and their health across the lifespan, including things that most people find, very important in life, such as fertility and sexual functioning and general health.
It's pretty basic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, we want kids to grow up and be happy. We all want that. We don't want them to have regrets and serious health problems.
Next, the most fiery interview of the year. Doctors come to us and say this system is wrong.
One?
It's a medical scandal.
One?
And
one doctor?
And when child psychologists... But I don't think it's funny at all.
You've already tried.
I think the casualties involved in this are incredibly sad.
Well, tonight we've heard from detransitioners and traumatised parents. But what about the experts encouraging confused kids to switch genders? Despite approaching gender clinics right around the country, only one specialist in this field agreed to speak. Here's Professor Ian Hickey from Sydney University with Liam Bartlett.
Professor, how are you?
Hi.
All right, okay. Professor, thanks for having a chat to us.
Pleasure.
Should we shut these gender clinics down, do you think, before they do any more damage to our children?
Absolutely not. In my view, most of the serious gender clinics in Australia do a great job and deliver obviously considerable mental health and physical health benefits.
So you agree with their affirmation model, do you, where essentially the child gets to dictate the terms?
The child doesn't dictate the terms. The child isn't driving the car here. And I think the position you're presenting is not representative of the genuine situation. Parents who've had kids...
Hang on, when you say the genuine situation...
The great majority...
Are you saying the people who are speaking out, those people who have been affected, the casualties in this, are not genuine?
What I'm saying is the great majority of people who come forward for care, kids who behaved in a certain way since a very early age, who come forward at puberty, and the youth who come forward in adolescence, genuinely come forward seeking to understand the situation in which they find themselves. So what really needs to be represented are many of the positive stories. How many lives have been saved?
So the kids whose lives have been wrecked, where do you put them?
In the whole of medicine, we are dealing with situations all the time. If you have a surgical procedure, if you have a medical procedure, you take any medicine, you seek care for any reason.
Yes.
There is a chance,
But
there are
after,
chances.
That's after comprehensive medical analysis, not an affirmation model, where a child goes in and has, after one consultation, puberty blockers prescribed.
No,
now,
I don't accept...
How do you explain that?
I don't accept that is what happens in the great majority of situations in Australia. What you're doing is picking out and actually attempting to actually dramatise and sensationalise a particular side, which is really sad, I think. So really sad.
Let me just go back to that other question again. How do you explain a child being put on puberty blockers, irreversible damage, after just one consultation?
Let's go back. Let's go back.
No, could you
I don't
address,
accept.
could
No,
you
I don't
address the
accept
question?
No. I think you also need to address the questions of, are you presenting an accurate picture? And I'd say no, you're not. There's always the possibility that medical care in any situation is not optimal. But if you talk about what is standard care in Australia in this area,
You're
delivered
using
by our
a
best...
lot of bureaucratic phrases.
It's
there.
not bureaucratic.
With respect, how many times have you come down from your academic ivory tower and spoken to the people on the ground
I speak
who
to
this
kids.
affects? How
I
many
speak to
times have
kids.
you spoken to the children
I speak to kids
where
every
it's gone
day.
wrong,
I speak
and
to
the
kids.
parents who are terrified?
I speak to kids every day and to parents every day who've gone through this situation, including those who've not been able to access care in the past, including those who go along and decide at various points to say, I'm happy to stop where I'm at. When you come back later in life and people may change their minds, that's entirely possible.
Well,
but to say that,
to
say somebody did the wrong thing at the time is also not true.
Professor, answer me this. You're happy to see a 15-year-old girl go and have a double mastectomy, are you?
No. Not necessarily. And as is the case in Australia, again, the case in Australia about kids at certain ages moving from just blocking to actually hormonal treatment to then potentially surgical is taken typically in a very considered way and not at early ages.
So at 15 years old, a child who is not legally deemed responsible enough to drive a car is somehow deemed medically fit enough to decide to mutilate her body surgically.
The language, no, your language used, first use language of mutilation, okay? The attempt to vilify the doctors involved and vilify the people involved, I think is entirely inappropriate.
I'm not vilifying anybody. I'm saying it's mutilation.
For example,
if you change your mind 4 years later and you've lost your breasts, you'd be pretty unhappy about it as well.
At 15 years old, children enter into the process of starting to be involved in their own medical decision-making around contraception, around their own health. Children get involved at 15 having to make decisions about all sorts of surgical procedures and other areas affecting their health. You try to make fun of the academic things. It's
I
true.
don't think it's funny
You've
at all.
already tried.
I think the casualties involved in this are incredibly sad. But I want you to address the real issue.
I want you to address the issue of the mental health harms of no action, of the systematic data about reductions in suicidality, of the potentials of mental health harm.
You'd rather take action, affirm their gender, go through the puberty blockers, irreversible, cross-sex hormones, irreversible. You'd rather do that than actually stop, wait, have a comprehensive medical analysis.
No, again, that's a misstatement. It's a complete mischaracterisation.
And take a pause.
No, there's a complete mischaracterisation of what I said. Gender-affirming care does not mean immediately moving to puberty blockers, immediately moving to hormone treatment, immediately moving to surgery. That's a complete mischaracterisation.
To use your language, why are the vast majority of kids turning up to these gender clinics and being put on that train?
You have to look at the whole process of what happens, and there's also mischaracterisation.
Parents are telling us they are being pushed to one side in this. Parents are telling us they're not being heard. Parents are telling us they're being isolated.
And how many parents have you told to that tell you the exact opposite?
What, Again.
Are they in your show?
Again, it's not,
the exact opposite.
It's not a mathematical competition.
No, but it is a realistic one. You're trying to characterise a system on the basis of some particular cases and ignore the great majority. What is that? What is that?
How do you explain the meteoric rise in numbers of kids in Australia presenting at gender clinics?
That's a much more interesting question. Sociologically, in our society, it's really interesting that more kids are coming forward for care.
How do you explain
that? Is a good thing. The idea that we are simple binary people, simple male, female, and happy with that, does not respect what has been known for centuries, that a great number of young people are not so binary, they're not so fixed. As our whole society becomes more inclusive and less rigid, more kids are coming forward. This is not just simply a fad. It's not just simply a fashion.
Really?
It's moving. Really, it's going closer to what has always been the reality.
Does the influence of social media have anything to do with it, in your opinion?
Increased awareness, you bet.
And you think that's healthy, do you?
Yes.
So when doctors come to us and say this system is wrong,
one,
it's a medical scandal.
One,
and
doctor.
And when child psychologists
one doctor
come to us, so here you are on numbers again. So how many do you want us to find? Do you want me to go back out there and come back to you in 12 months' time?
I'd like to refer to the College of Physicians. I'd like to refer to the AMA. I'd like to refer to the College of Psychiatrists. Large numbers of doctors here in Australia and internationally who are continually looking at the evidence.
So when a child psychiatrist comes along, just one, professor in your own language, and they get suspended because they present a different opinion, what do you say to that?
That person is in dealings with their employer. If you go to the College of Psychiatrists... If you go to the College of Psychiatrists... No, I'm going to the College of Psychiatrists.
You just go for the bureaucratic headline.
It's not bureaucratic.
You don't want to drill down on the cases,
That's the consensus.
do you? Because it doesn't...
I want
it
to drill
doesn't
down...
affirm with your story.
No, I want to drill down on the thousands of cases in Australia where this good practice is occurring. That's what's happening.
So finally, what do you say to the parents, to those parents who have spoken to us, to the parents who have written to us, who are terrified about the situation and what's happening to their children?
I'd be quite happy to have conversations with any of those people to hear their story.
Professor, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Professor. I think, your argument about the majority is really heartless.
I don't agree. I've got my heart for the people in any medical situation who might find themselves harmed by medical care is the same for those who've benefited. It's not heartless at all. It's heartless to ignore the great majority of people who've benefited.
No, you just accept. You just accept that there are casualties on the side of the road.
Do you accept from any surgical procedure that something may go wrong?
I don't accept that children have
ever had surgery yourself?
Yes, I don't accept.
And did you accept there was a risk?
I don't accept that children have to be put at risk unnecessarily.
If a child has a surgical procedure for appendicitis, a surgical for injury, is that an unreasonable risk?
Well, that's because the organ has already failed.
So if this situation arises, a kid's mental health, their life is in danger, they're really distressed, their development's in danger, doing nothing is fine?
But there's lots of ingredients in that cake. So why don't you look at the whole cake?
We do.
Professor, I think we're being quite courageous actually airing those people's stories because no one is listening to them. People like you kick them to the curb and say, well, the greater good, too bad, too sad.
And that's entirely untrue and also unfair. It's an easy sensationalist thing to say.
Well, I'm quite happy for you to call me a, tabloid media sensationalist scumbag. I couldn't care less.
That's a very interesting characterisation of yourself.
I'm interested in the future of the children here in Australia, Professor. All the children? Every single one of them. Every single one of them.
Where are all the children who've done well?
The children who have done well, fantastic.
Where are they?
But
where are their parents?
What about the casualties?
Where are their doctors?
You just completely ignore the people who fall through the cracks.
We do not ignore, and I don't personally ignore.
We can play verbal gymnastics all day long.
I meet with people all the time. I'm quite happy to meet with, and I do meet with and talk with people all the time who've been on all sides of this debate.
Next.
It is not possible to be the opposite sex. It's just a fact.
It's a lot of white suburban kids who feel inadequate. Oh, but if I transition, I'll be special.
A lot of these children are promised something that cannot be achieved. It is not possible to be the opposite sex. It's just a fact. Queensland is currently trying to expand the number of people available to prescribe puberty blockers across the state. At the same time that the NHS in England has announced that puberty blockers will only be administered within a research trial or in extremely exceptional circumstances across the entire country. It makes no sense as to why we're going in opposite directions.
Oh, you got me tired, sick of hearing hold on, got stuck in the fire.
I don't think any child should have their breasts removed in order to satisfy their dislike of their body.
At 19, Chloe hopes one day to get married. She'll never be able to breastfeed, but she does hope she'll be able to give birth to a child of her own. Mel is still working out what her future looks like. She's not sure about motherhood, but would like to meet someone to share her life with. For now, she is focusing on her health.
For you now, are you comfortable being a woman again?
Yeah, well, I'm female. I'm like, it's not just that I'm a woman, it's like my sex is intrinsic to my experiences. Being female is intrinsic to who I am.
Courtney is happy where she's at. She's not sure if she wants to date men or women, but definitely wants to be a mum one day.
But as for how the medical profession's doing this, I think a lot of them, they seem to have the best intentions. They really honestly believe they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, people are literally killing themselves. It's literal violence. No, it's not. It's just, it's a lot of white suburban kids who feel this, they feel disconnected from reality, they feel depressed, they feel inadequate. Oh, but if I transition, I'll be special.
I speak to you today as a victim of one of the biggest medical scandals in the history of the United States of America. I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through. I will do anything to make sure that no child or mentally ill adult is ever lied to and has parts of themselves ripped away in this way ever again.
How do you refer to yourself now?
Just the way that I was born. I'm Chloe. I'm a girl. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a beautiful thing, and I've learned to embrace that,
Nothing's gonna stop me, no one's gonna take my crown.
A very emotional show tonight. We know that opinions are polarised, but if you'd like to know more, you can watch extended interviews online at 7news.com.au. Until next Sunday, I'm Michael Usher. Good night.